Cool shoes. Nice boots.
Not just whether people still love Miranda Priestley, whether they love her enough to make this sequel feel commercially enormous and right now. That answer looks a lot closer to yes than a lot of people probably expected. The latest box office reporting has The Devil Wears Prada to tracking for an opening weekend in the mid-$60 million range domestically, with The Hollywood Reporter saying it could strut to as much as $65 million in the US over its first 3 days. That is a huge number for this kind of movie. Not superhero huge, no. Not animated mega hit huge. But in the context of a comedy-drama legacy sequel centered on fashion meteor, workplace warfare, and for returning stars nearly 20 years after the original, it is a serious statement, and it matters even more once you compare it to the original. The first Devil Wears Prada opened to $27.5 million in 2006 and went on to make about $326.6 million worldwide. That was already an excellent outcome for what was essentially a sharply packaged adult, skewing studio hit. But if the sequel really lands around $65 million or $66 million domestically on opening weekend, then it is not just slightly outperforming the first film. It is blowing past its original starting point by a ridiculous margin, even before you get into the cultural inflation effect of how much bigger the brand has become over the years. That is the part people should not underestimate. The Devil Wears Prada did not just age well. It expanded. It became one of those movies that escaped its own release window and turned into permanent pop infrastructure. Miranda Priestley became shorthand. Trulian became a punchline with academic shelf life. Emily became a cult favorite side character who somehow kept growing in stature. And Andy, who once played as an audience surrogate, now sits inside a completely different media conversation about ambition, labor, status, femininity, and compromise than she did in 2006. In other words, this is not just a sequel to a hit. It is a sequel to a movie that spent 20 years increasing its cultural equity. That is a very powerful thing if you know how to cash it in, and this campaign clearly does. The final trailer has leaned hard into the right mix: familiar faces, sharpened power dynamics, glossy fashion spectacle, and just enough sense that this movie is not merely repeating the original. Add the Lady Gaga and Doechii runway push, the red carpet fashion event energy, and a release date planted directly on May 1st, 2026. And it is obvious 20th Century Studios is not treating this like a cute little reunion movie. The studio is treating it like a launch title for the summer box office that confidence feels earned. Because the sequel does seem to have found the one angle that actually makes it commercially dangerous: changed power. Miranda is not just back. She is under pressure. Emily is not just back. She is powerful. Andy is not just back. She may actually be able to hurt Miranda now. That is how you turn nostalgia into motion. You do not simply reassemble the old board. You flip the hierarchy and let the audience come in wanting to see how these people now damage each other. That is not just good sequel logic. It is good ticket selling logic. People will come for the reunion. They stay interested if the reunion promises conflict instead of comfort. And the movie has another advantage a lot of people miss when talking about box office. It does not need to appeal to everyone. It just needs to appeal intensely to the people already primed for it, and then cross over from there. That is often a better commercial position than trying to be a giant four-quadrant crowd pleaser from the start. The Devil Wears Prada already has a massive recognition advantage with women who grew up with the original, with younger audiences who inherited it through streaming and memes, and with prestige pop viewers who treat fashion, celebrity, and workplace conflict as event entertainment. That is a sturdy coalition. If the film gets decent word of mouth, it does not need to explode instantly into every demographic to become a major hit. It just needs to open strong and hold. That is the real question, because opening weekend is not destiny, it is leverage. A big debut tells you awareness is there. It does not automatically tell you whether people love the movie enough to keep it moving. That is where Rotten Tomatoes audience scores, CinemaScore, and general word of mouth become huge. The original only had a B CinemaScore, and not overwhelming audience score by today's standards, which means the sequel actually has room to outperform the first film in terms of audience momentum. People respond more enthusiastically this time around. That is a very interesting possibility, especially because legacy sequels often survive or die on post-opening conversation. The budget conversation is where things get a little sharper. There is no universally confirmed final production budget in the public reporting I trust most right now. But a number floating around in trade-adjacent coverage is that the film could be significantly more expensive than the original and possibly as high as around $150 million. If it is anywhere near that, then the commercial expectations obviously rise. A movie like this can be a big hit and still end up being judged against a much higher bar than the original if the spending really escalated that much. That is why a strong opening matters. Not because it guarantees profitability, but because it immediately changes the pressure curve. Still, I think the larger read here is simple. The Devil Wears Prada 2 does not look like a sequel limping out on borrowed affection. It looks like a sequel arriving with actual commercial force. That alone is worth paying attention to. So where do I land on this box office outlook? I think The Devil Wears Prada 2 is shaping up to be one of the most interesting mainstream success stories of 2026 precisely because it is proving that not every event movie has to wear a cape, carry IP fatigue, or pretend adult audiences disappeared. Sometimes all you need is a beloved title, a cast people still care about, a hook that updates the power struggle, and a campaign confident enough to sell style as combat. That is what this looks like. And if the opening lands where it is currently tracking, then the sequel will not just be honoring the original, it will be strutting right past it. That is the real headline. And May 1st is getting very close, and that may be the clearest reason this sequel's forecast matters. This is not a comic book event, a remake built on spectacle alone, or a franchise entry propped up by pure action mechanics. It is a star-driven, dialogue-driven, fashion industry legacy film aiming to open like something much louder. If it pulls that off, it says something very useful about what audiences still want from theatrical releases in 2026. Recognizable characters, real tension, strong iconography, and a movie that knows exactly who it is selling to. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. This is where these kinds of films come to life. Until the next story, stay curious, be critical, keep your eyes on the screen, and remember, every film you haven't seen is a new film.